When Tabitha handed me a plate of cold funeral leftovers, she told the room I probably needed the free meal for the week. My brother laughed, certain they had successfully cut the broke, messy little sister out of our mother's estate. They had no idea I wasn't actually poor, and they certainly didn't know that while they were rewriting the will, I was quietly buying the mortgage on the very roof over their heads. The winter wind in Briar Glen, Massachusetts, did not bite. It judged. It was a cold that settled into the marrow, much like the unspoken expectations of the town itself. I stepped off the train and pulled my collar up, bracing myself against the gust that swept down the platform. It was the same charcoal wool coat I had worn for the last 5 winters. It was warm, durable, and clean. But to my family, it was a walking billboard for failure. I was 33 years old. I had just lost my mother, and as far as anyone in this zip code knew, I was barely scraping by. The house on Renfield Lane looked exactly as it had in my childhood. A sprawling colonial revival that sat back from the road with a dignified, reserved air. The white siding gleamed even under the overcast sky, and the black shutters were freshly painted. It was a house that demanded posture. It was the place where I had learned to walk, where I had learned to hide, and where I had learned that love in the Stewart family was often conditional on performance. My mother, Marla Stewart, had died of a sudden aneurysm 3 days ago. The shock was still a physical weight in my chest, a dull ache that made breathing difficult. I had not cried yet. I had been too busy managing the logistics of travel and the crushing, suffocating dread of seeing my siblings. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. The cars were already lined up, a sleek black sedan for my brother, Graham, a pristine, oversized SUV for my sister, Tabitha. My rental car, parked at the end of the line, looked small and utilitarian. When I opened the front door, the smell hit me first. Lilies and floor wax, the scent of morning. Tabitha was in the foyer, directing a catering server with the precision of an air traffic controller. She looked up, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She lingered on my coat. A small, tight smile pinched the corners of her mouth. "Serenity," she said. She did not hug me. She reached out and brushed a piece of lint from my shoulder. "You made it. We were worried you might not be able to afford the train ticket on such short notice. Graham was ready to wire you something." "I managed," I said, my voice steady. "Well, you are here now," she said, smoothing her silk blouse. "Try to mingle. And please, Serenity, don't talk about your freelance work today. People don't need to know about the struggle right now. Let's keep it dignified for Mom." I nodded, stepping past her into the living room. The struggle. That was the narrative. Serenity, the flighty youngest child. Serenity, who refused to take a corporate job at the insurance firm where Graham was a vice president. Serenity, who moved to the city to do contract work and lived in a small apartment. They saw the lack of a luxury car and the absence of flashy jewelry and assumed I was destitute. They did not know about the contract work I actually did. They did not know about the quiet, high-stakes consulting I provided for crisis management firms. They certainly did not know about the settlement I had received 2 years ago from Lark and Howe Media after I blew the whistle on their accounting fraud. It was a sum that could have bought this house twice over. But in this family, money was a weapon, and I had learned long ago not to hand them ammunition. The post-funeral gathering was a blur of black fabric and murmured condolences. I stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of water, watching my siblings work the room. Graham was holding court near the bar, looking solemn and important as he accepted sympathies. Tabitha was playing the tragic hostess, accepting casseroles with a tearful grace that felt rehearsed. Later, as the guests began to thin out, the atmosphere shifted. The performance of grief gave way to the business of the living. We gathered in the kitchen, the heart of the house, where the island was piled high with leftover food. Graham loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. "Well," he said, exhaling loudly, "that went as well as could be expected. Miles said the will reading is tomorrow at 10. We should get it over with." "Tomorrow?" I asked, Isn't that a bit soon? Tabitha began snapping lids onto plastic containers with aggressive efficiency. No point in dragging it out. Serenity, the estate is complex. Unlike some people, Graham and I have schedules to keep. She picked up a heavy foil tray of lasagna, barely touched. She held it out to me, her expression dropping into a mask of pity that felt like a slap. Here, she said, you take this, Serenity, and the ham, too. God knows you can use the groceries. It will save you from having to spend anything on food for the week. Graham chuckled into his glass. It was a low sound. Good thinking. Tabs, we don't want Serenity starving down in the city. Pack her a care package. I looked at the lasagna. I could buy the finest Italian restaurant in Briar Glen if I wanted to, but I didn't reach for my wallet. I didn't correct them. I reached out and took the tray. Thank you, I said softly. I appreciate it. Of course, Tabitha said, patting my arm with a condescending lightness. We look out for you. That is what family does. I turned away to hide the flash of anger in my eyes. As I busied myself with stacking the containers, I listened to them talk. They had forgotten I was there, or perhaps they just didn't consider me a person worth whispering around. We need to finalize the transfer on the LLC, Graham said, his voice dropping slightly but still audible. Stewart Ridge Holdings can't sit in limbo. I told the accountant to categorize the restructuring as paperwork simplification. Is Serenity on any of the old incorporation papers? Tabitha asked. No, Graham said. Mom kept her off. Thank God. Can you imagine explaining equity to her? She would probably sell her shares for rent money. Just make sure, Tabitha said sharply. Don't ask Serenity to sign anything. If she asks, it is just administrative maintenance. We handle it. I froze, my hand hovering over a container of potato salad. Stewart Ridge Holdings. It was the small property company my father had started. Mostly a few commercial strips and some land investments. I assumed it was part of the general estate. The way they spoke of it, restructuring, simplification, sounded practiced. It sounded like they were closing ranks. The next morning, the office of Miles Harker smelled of leather and stale coffee. Miles had been the family attorney for 30 years. He was a man who usually projected the confidence of a country club president, but today, he looked diminished. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, shuffling papers, refusing to meet my eyes. Tabitha and Graham sat in the leather armchairs, looking relaxed. I sat on the smaller chair to the side, still wearing my charcoal coat. Let us begin, Miles said, his voice tight. Marla wanted this to be simple. He began to read. It was a standard preamble, legal boilerplate that sounded cold in the silent room. Then came the distribution. To my daughter, Serenity Stewart, I leave my personal effects, including my jewelry, my photo albums, and the antique vanity in the guest room. These items hold the memories of our time together. I waited for the rest. I waited for the financial distribution, the split of the liquid assets, the shares in the company. To my children, Tabitha Stewart and Graham Stewart, I leave the residue of the estate, including the real property located at Renfield Lane, all contents therein not previously specified, and the controlling interest in Stewart Ridge Holdings. Silence filled the room, a heavy, suffocating silence. Tabitha let out a long breath, her shoulders dropping. She looked at Graham, and they shared a look of undisguised relief. It wasn't grief. It was the look of gamblers who had just seen the final card. Is that it? I asked. My voice sounded small, even to me. Miles finally looked up. He adjusted his glasses, staring at a point on the wall just above my head. The estate logistics were complex. Serenity, your mother felt that given your, shall we say, non-traditional lifestyle, it was best to leave the management of the assets to Tabitha and Graham. They are better positioned to handle the tax liabilities. Tax liabilities, I repeated. So, I am disinherited because of taxes? Not disinherited, Tabitha interrupted, her voice sweet and poisonous. Protected. Mom didn't want you burdened. Serenity. The house costs a fortune to maintain. The company requires constant oversight. You are not built for that kind of stress. You are the creative one, the free spirit. She left you the jewelry, Graham added. Grandma's pearls are in there. Those are worth a few $1,000s. Easy. You could sell them if you get in a bind. I looked at Miles. He was sweating. A thin sheen of perspiration glistened on his forehead. He was shuffling the papers again, his hands shaking slightly. Your siblings handled most of the estate logistics in the final months, Miles said, rushing the words. They were very helpful to your mother when her health began to decline. I stood up. I see. We can give you a ride to the station, Graham offered, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Unless you want to stay and help us start inventorying the house, we need to clear it out. Clear it out? I asked. You are selling it? We are exploring options, Tabitha said quickly. But that is adult business. Serenity. Don't worry your head about it. Take the jewelry. Go back to the city. We will mail you a check if we find any loose cash in the accounts. I walked out of the office without saying another word. I waited in the hallway until I heard Tabitha and Graham laughing as they headed toward the elevator. I waited until the elevator doors dinged and closed. Then, I turned around and walked back into Miles Harker's office. He jumped when I opened the door. He was pouring a drink from a crystal decanter on his credenza. Serenity, he stammered. I thought you left. I did, I said. I closed the door behind me and locked it. Then I came back. Sit down, Miles. I really don't think... Sit down. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke with the flat, commanding tone I used when I was negotiating a settlement for a client who was about to lose everything. It was a tone Miles had never heard from me. He sat. My mother called me 2 weeks ago, I said, remaining standing. She talked about the garden, she talked about the leaking roof, and she said, specifically, that she wanted to make sure things were fair between the kids. She used that word, fair. Miles swallowed hard. People change their minds. Serenity, illness, it confuses things. She wasn't confused, I said. She was sharp. Why is my inheritance purely emotional? Miles, why did my mother, who was obsessed with equity, cut me out of the financial legacy of this family? Miles looked down at his hands. The documents were signed. Serenity, everything is legal. Your sister? Tabitha was very involved. She facilitated the meetings. She explained that you were struggling, that you were unstable. Unstable, I repeated. She said you were having mental health episodes, Miles whispered, looking ashamed. That giving you money would be dangerous, that you might hurt yourself. Marla was terrified. She just wanted to keep you safe. I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had rewritten my reality. They had poisoned my mother's last memories of me with lies about my sanity. Thank you, Miles, I said. That is all I needed to know. I left him sitting there, staring into his glass. I needed air. I walked down Main Street, the cold wind feeling like the only honest thing in town. I found myself near the small clinic where my childhood friend, Nina Caldwell, worked. I hadn't planned to see her, but I needed to see a face that didn't look at me with calculation. Nina was on her break, smoking a cigarette behind the building. When she saw me, she dropped it and ran over, pulling me into a fierce hug. I heard, she said into my hair. I am so sorry. Ren, your mom was a good lady. She was, I said, my voice finally cracking. We sat on a concrete bench. Nina looked at me, her expression troubled. She was a nurse, used to observing people, and she saw the tension in my jaw. How was the reading? She asked. Predictable, I said. I am the charity case. They got the house. Nina bit her lip. She looked around to make sure we were alone. Ren, I shouldn't say this, HIPAA and all that, even though it wasn't at the hospital, but I do home visits in the neighborhood. What is it? I was at the Miller house, next door to your mom's, about a week before she died. It was late, maybe 11 at night. I saw lights on in your mom's study. Mom often worked late, I said. It wasn't your mom. Nina said darkly. I saw Tabitha. The blinds were open. She was carrying stacks of folders, and she had one of those portable scanners, the wand kind. She was scanning document after document, shoving them back into drawers, moving fast. She looked frantic, like she owned the place already. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the weather settled over me. A week before she died? Yeah, Nina said. I thought maybe she was just helping with bills. But looking at you now, it didn't look like helping. Ren, it looked like a raid. I thanked Nina and walked back to my rental car. I drove to Renfield Lane. Tabitha and Graham were gone, presumably off to celebrate their victory with a lunch I wasn't invited to. I had a key, the spare one hidden inside the hollow fake rock in the garden, a secret from my childhood they had likely forgotten. The house was silent. I walked into my mother's study. It was a room of dark wood and velvet, smelling of her perfume. I sat in her chair. I looked at the desk. My mother was a creature of habit. For 30 years, she had kept a heavy fireproof lockbox under the knee hole of her desk. It contained the deeds, the birth certificates, the insurance policies. She called it the important stuff. She made us memorize the combination when we were teenagers. I looked under the desk. The carpet was indented, a rectangular ghost in the pile where the heavy box had sat for decades. It was gone. I felt a wave of nausea, but it was quickly replaced by something else, a clarity, a sharp, crystalline focus that I recognized from my work. It was the feeling of finding the glitch in the ledger, the lie in the testimony. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray winter garden. They thought I was broke. They thought I was impulsive. They thought I was an emotional wreck who would take the jewelry and the insults and fade away into a life of poverty. They had built their entire strategy on a version of Serenity Stewart that did not exist. I could scream. I could hire a lawyer and sue them tomorrow. I could storm into their celebratory lunch and reveal my bank balance, throwing my success in their faces. But that would be impulsive. That would be emotional. If I fought them now, openly, they would circle the wagons. They would use the estate's money, my money, to fight me. They would drag out the unstable narrative in court. No, I needed to know what they were hiding. I needed to know why Tabitha was scanning documents at midnight. I needed to know why Graham was so desperate to restructure the company. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hand was steady. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Northline Fiduciary Group, Ruth Ellison's office. A voice answered. It is Serenity, I said. Serenity. Ruth's voice came on the line a moment later, warm but professional. I am so sorry about your mother. How are you holding up? I am fine. Ruth, I said. My voice sounded strange in the empty house. Cold, hard. I need your help with something specific. Anything, Ruth said. Do you need to liquidate some assets for the estate costs? No, I said. I need to do the opposite. I need to know something. Ruth, if someone is absolutely convinced that you are broke, if they have bet everything on the fact that you have no resources, what is the safest way to stay invisible while you verify what they have stolen from you? There was a pause on the line. Ruth had managed my portfolio for 5 years. She knew I was cautious. She knew I was private. But she had never heard me sound like this. Serenity, Ruth said slowly. What is going on? My family thinks I am a charity case, I said, staring at the empty space where the lockbox used to be. I want to let them keep thinking it. I want to buy their debt. Ruth, I want to buy the ground they are standing on, but I need to do it without them seeing my face until it is too late to stop me. That requires a very specific legal structure, Ruth said, her tone shifting to pure business. Blind trusts, LLCs nested in other states. It takes time. Start it, I said. Start it today. I hung up the phone. I looked around the room one last time. I adjusted my charcoal coat, buttoning it all the way to the chin. I would play the part. I would take their lasagna. I would let them mock my clothes. I would let them think they had won. Because the only thing more dangerous than a wealthy enemy is a wealthy enemy you think is helpless. I walked out of the house and locked the door behind me. The game had begun. 2 days later, I sat in a booth at a coffee shop called The Roasted Bean, located 3 towns over from Briar Glen. I had chosen it specifically because the coffee was terrible and the lighting was worse, meaning none of the Briar Glen socialites would ever be caught dead here. Ruth Ellison slid into the booth opposite me. She was a woman of 60 with steel gray hair cut into a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She placed a heavy leather folder on the table between us. "I have the preliminary breakdown of your liquid assets," Ruth said, her voice low. "And I have set up the shell structure you asked for. But Serenity, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me we are not doing something illegal." I wrapped my hands around my mug, feeling the warmth seep into my cold fingers. "It is not illegal. Ruth, it is just private." Ruth sighed, opening the folder. "I have managed your portfolio since you walked into my office 5 years ago with that first check from your consulting gig. I watched you build this, slowly, methodically." She tapped a page. "And then, of course, the settlement. The settlement. Even seeing the line item on the paper made my stomach tighten. Lark and Howe Media had been a titan in the industry, and I had been a mid-level project manager who noticed that the invoices for digital advertising buys were being routed through a vendor that did not exist. When I reported it internally, they fired me for performance issues and blacklisted me. I spent 18 months fighting them. I lost sleep, I lost weight, I lost the ability to trust corporate structures, but I had documentation, mountains of it. In the end, they paid me to go away and never speak of it again. The non-disclosure agreement was ironclad, but the check they wrote me had 7 figures before the decimal point. I had never told my mother. I had never told my siblings. To them, the 18 months of unemployment were just Serenity failing again, Serenity having a breakdown. I had let them believe it because it was easier than explaining the trauma of a whistleblower suit, and because part of me knew, even then, that they would only see the money, not the cost. "The settlement is secure," I said. "The investments have performed well. I have the liquidity to buy the note on the house if it comes up, and I have enough to buy out the company if I have to, correct?" "You have enough to buy the whole block," Ruth said dryly. "But that is not the point. If your family has manipulated the estate, Serenity, you don't need a hostile takeover. You need a judge. You need to prove fraud." "If I prove fraud, they go to jail," I said. "Or they get publicly humiliated and the family name is destroyed. I am not trying to burn them down. Ruth, I just want leverage. I want to know why they did it." Ruth studied my face. She saw the exhaustion there, but she also saw the steel. She closed the folder. "If you are going down this road, you need a mechanic, not a philosopher," she said. "You need Dana Whitlock. She practices out of a brownstone in Cambridge. She is expensive, she is unsentimental, and she is known for quietly winning ugly cases without getting mud on her heels." "Make the introduction," I said. Dana Whitlock's office was the antithesis of Miles Harker's, where Miles's office was filled with dark wood and shadows. Dana's was all glass and stark white surfaces. She was younger than I expected, perhaps 40, with a severe ponytail and glasses that reflected the gray sky outside. She listened to my story without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching rhythmically. When I finished explaining the missing lockbox, the late-night scanning, and the hasty will reading, she stopped writing. "It is a classic squeeze," Dana said, her voice crisp. "They create a narrative of incompetence around the beneficiary to justify the exclusion. It helps them sleep at night. They tell themselves they are protecting the estate from your recklessness. They have everyone believing it," I said. "Even the family attorney. Miles Harker is a country club lawyer," Dana said dismissively. "He values comfort over diligence. If your sister presented him with a neat package, he likely didn't look too closely at the wrapping." She pulled a file toward her. I had authorized her to pull the probate records that morning. "I have looked at the filings," Dana said. "There is something off about the amendment to the trust. The one that removed you as a beneficiary of the real estate. She turned the document around so I could see it. It was a digital copy of the signature page. Look at the witness signatures, she said, pointing with a manicured nail. And look at your mother's signature. I squinted at the screen. It looks like her signature. It looks exactly like her signature, Dana corrected. I overlaid it with a signature from a document she signed 3 years ago. A standard healthcare proxy. They are identical, not similar, identical. Down to the pixelated variance in the ink flow. I looked up at her. You think they forged it? I think human beings are not laser printers, Dana said. No one signs their name exactly the same way twice. There is always a variance in pressure, in angle. This looks like a copy-paste job, a high-quality one, but a template nonetheless. And the witnesses? They are 2 paralegals from Miles's firm. Convenient. So we challenge it? Not yet, Dana said. If we allege forgery now, they will claim you are lashing out because you were cut out. They will say you are desperate. We need more than a suspicious signature. We need to know the motivation. People don't commit felony forgery just because they don't like their sister. They do it because they need the money. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. A text from Tabitha. Family meeting. Tomorrow at noon. Briar Glen Country Club. We have a proposal for you. Please come. We want to help. I showed the screen to Dana. Go, she said. Listen. Agree to nothing. Sign nothing. But let them talk. People who think they have won talk too much. They get sloppy with their generosity. I hate that place, I said, staring at the text. They know I hate it. That is why they chose it, Dana said. It is home turf for them. It is designed to make you feel small. Wear something nice, serenity, but not too nice. Let them feel big. The Briar Glen Country Club had not changed since I was a teenager working summer shifts at the pool snack bar. It still smelled of chlorine, expensive perfume, and old money. The carpet in the dining room was a deep hunter green, and the walls were lined with portraits of men who had been dead for 50 years. Tabitha and Graham were waiting at a table near the window, overlooking the frost-covered golf course. Tabitha was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. Graham was in a blazer, looking every inch the concerned patriarch. When I approached the table, Tabitha stood up halfway, offering a cheek to kiss. Serenity, she said. I am so glad you came. You look tired. Are you eating enough? I am fine, Tabitha, I said, sliding into the chair. Just busy. Busy with what? Graham asked, signaling the waiter. Still doing those little online articles? Contract work, I said. It pays the bills. Well, that is actually what we wanted to talk to you about, Graham said. He waited until the waiter had poured water for the table before continuing. We know things are tight for you, and we know Mom's will was a bit of a shock. It was, I said quietly. We have been talking, Tabitha said, leaning forward. Her eyes were wide, brimming with a performative sincerity. We don't want you to feel abandoned. Serenity. We know Mom wanted you to have the sentimental things, but Graham and I feel that, well, you deserve a little cushion for closure. Graham reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek folder. He slid it across the white tablecloth. We are prepared to offer you a cash payout from our personal shares of the estate, Graham said. $25,000. He said the number with a gravity that suggested he was handing me the crown jewels. $25,000. It was a significant amount of money for most people. For the broke version of serenity they had invented in their heads, it was a lifeline. For the real serenity, it was less than the quarterly tax bill on my investment portfolio. $25,000, I repeated, keeping my face neutral. It is a gift, Tabitha said quickly. Tax-free? Effectively. We just want to help you get on your feet, maybe put a down payment on a condo in the city, or go back to school. There is just one small condition, Graham said, tapping the folder. We need you to sign a waiver. It is just standard legal language. It says you accept this amount in full satisfaction of any claims against the estate or Stewart Ridge Holdings. It just keeps things clean. We don't want the probate court dragging this out for years, eating up the money and legal fees. We want you to have the cash now, when you need it." I opened the folder. The document was titled Settlement Agreement and Release of Claims. It was 3 pages long. My eyes scanned the legalese. It was a total surrender. By signing this, I would waive my right to challenge the will, to audit the company books, or to claim any ownership in the house. "You want me to sign away my rights to the house," I said. "Serenity, be reasonable," Tabitha said, her voice taking on that edge of frustration she used when I was a child. "You can't afford the house. The property taxes alone are $12,000 a year. The heating bill is another $4,000. If we gave you a share of the house, it would bankrupt you. We are doing you a kindness. We are taking on the burden so you don't have to. We don't want you stressed by responsibilities you can't afford," Graham added. "Mom wouldn't want that." I looked at them. I looked at the anxious tilt of Graham's eyebrows. I looked at the way Tabitha's hand was gripping her napkin so tight, her knuckles were white. They were desperate. If the will was ironclad, if everything was truly above board, they wouldn't be offering me $25,000. They would just ignore me. People don't pay settlements to people who have no case. I closed the folder. "I am overwhelmed," I said, letting my shoulders slump. I looked down at my lap. "I didn't expect this." "Take the money, Ren," Graham said softly. "It is a lot of cash. Think of what you could do with it." "I need to think about it," I said. "It is so generous, but I am not good with legal papers. You know that. I get confused." Tabitha exchanged a look with Graham. Annoyance flickered in her eyes, but she smoothed it over quickly. "Of course," she said. "But we need an answer soon. Serenity, the offer isn't open forever. We have estate bills to pay." "I understand," I said. "Thank you. Really." I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. "Aren't you staying for lunch?" Tabitha asked. "I ordered the Cobb salad for you. No dressing." "I can't," I said. "I have to catch the train. But thank you. For everything." I walked out of the dining room, feeling their eyes boring into my back. I made it to the lobby before my hands started shaking, not from fear, from rage. They were trying to buy my birthright for the price of a used sedan. I was waiting for my ride in the vestibule when I heard 2 women talking near the coat check. I recognized one of them, Mrs. Gable, a neighbor of my mother's who was notorious for her gossip. "It is tragic, really," Mrs. Gable was saying to her companion. "Tabitha told me the sister made a terrible scene at the funeral, begging for money right there in the kitchen." "No," the other woman gasped. "Oh yes. Tabitha said she got angry when they said no. Started shouting about how she was owed. Apparently, she has some debts in the city, gambling, or maybe drugs. You know how the young people are. Tabitha is a saint for dealing with it so quietly." I stood frozen behind a pillar. The humiliation washed over me, hot and prickly. Tabitha hadn't just cut me out. She was salting the earth. She was building a narrative that would discredit me before I even opened my mouth. If I fought back now, everyone in town would see it as the desperate lashing out of an addict or a failure. I walked out into the cold air. I didn't cry. I didn't call them out. I got into my car and drove straight to Dana Whitlock's office. "They offered $25,000, I told Dana as I paced the length of her office. "And they are spreading rumors that I am a drug addict or a gambler to explain why I might challenge them." Dana sat at her desk, her face illuminated by the glow of her monitor. She didn't look up. She was scrolling through something, her eyes narrowing. "$25,000 is a low number," Dana murmured. "That is the number you offer when you don't have much liquidity yourself." "They have the company," I said. "Stewart Ridge Holdings has assets." "Does it?" Dana clicked a mouse button. "I have been digging into the property records while you were at your lunch. Public records are fascinating things. Serenity, did you know the house on Renfield Lane was refinanced 18 months ago?" I stopped pacing. "Refinanced? Mom owned it free and clear. Dad paid off the mortgage in '98. "She did own it," Dana said. Until 18 months ago, a new lien was recorded against the deed. Lender is Hearthstone Lending. It is a second-tier lender. Serenity. The kind you go to when the big banks say no. High interest. Aggressive terms. How much? $400,000, Dana said. But here's the kicker. It is an interest-only loan for 2 years, with a balloon payment due at the 24th month. I did the math in my head. 18 months ago, that means the balloon payment is due. In 6 months, Dana finished. $400,000 due in full. If they don't pay it, Hearthstone forecloses. They lose the house. I sank into the chair opposite her. The pieces were falling into place. The desperation, the scanning of documents, the rush to settle the estate. They borrowed against the house, I whispered. Mom must have agreed to it? She would never risk the house. Maybe she did, Dana said. Or maybe she was told it was for something else. Maybe she was told it was to save the company. Or maybe she didn't know the terms. Where did the money go? I asked. $400,000 doesn't just vanish. That is the question, Dana said. And that is why they are scared. They aren't just greedy. Serenity. They are drowning. They are living in a house of cards that is about to collapse. And they needed to cut you out because they couldn't afford to split the wreckage with you. They needed the entirety of the estate's remaining assets to try and plug the hole. I thought of Tabitha's cashmere sweater. I thought of Graham's country club membership. I thought of the way they looked at me with pity, mocking my coat, mocking my life. They are broke, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They are mocking me for being broke, but they are the ones who are broke. Asset-rich, cash-poor, and heavily leveraged, Dana corrected. It is a common story in towns like Briar Glen. Keeping up appearances is expensive. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city skyline. This changes things, I said. It does, Donna agreed. It means the house is vulnerable. If that balloon payment is missed, the note goes into default. Hearthstone will look to sell the debt or foreclose. And if someone were to buy that note, I said, turning back to her, if someone were to step into the shoes of the lender, then that person would own the mortgage, Dana said. That person would have the right to demand payment. And if payment isn't made, that person would have the right to take the house. Not as a sister, I said, but as a creditor. Exactly. But first, I said, we need to confirm the fraud. We need to know exactly what they did with the money. If we are going to do this, we do it by the book. Agreed, Dana said. I will draft a formal demand for an accounting. As a disinherited heir who is being asked to sign a release, you have a right to know the value of what you are waiving. We will ask for the last 3 years of financials for Stewart Ridge Holdings and the estate. They won't give it to us, I said. No, Dana smiled. A sharp, predatory thing. They won't. They will stall. They will send a summary, and that will be our proof that they are hiding something. I drove back to Briar Glen that evening. I parked my rental car down the street from the house on Renfield Lane. It was dark, but the lights were on in the living room. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the silhouettes moving behind them. I watched them. Tabitha was pacing. Graham was sitting with his head in his hands. For years, I had looked at this house and felt excluded. I had felt like the failure, the one who couldn't make it work, the one who didn't fit into their perfect picture. Now, watching the shadows of my siblings pace in a house they had mortgaged to the hilt, I didn't feel exclusion. I felt a profound, heartbreaking pity. They were trapped in a prison of their own making. They were so terrified of losing their status that they had sacrificed their integrity, their mother's wishes, and their relationship with their sister to protect it. But pity didn't mean I would let them get away with it. Pity didn't mean I would sign their waiver. I thought of the rumors Tabitha was spreading. Drug addict, gambler. I hardened my heart. They had chosen this path. They had chosen to make me the enemy. The next day, Dana sent the formal letter. It was polite, professional, and demanding. We requested full bank statements, tax returns, and the ledger for Stewart Ridge Holdings. 3 days later, we received a response from Miles Harker. It was a single page. A summary of assets. It listed the house value, inflated, the company value, vague, and a line item for Missy C debts. There were no bank statements, no ledgers, just a typed sheet of paper that Tabitha had likely dictated. Dana called me as soon as it arrived. "It is exactly what we expected," she said. "They are stonewalling. A summary is not an accounting, it is a deflection." "So, what does that confirm?" I asked. "It confirms they cannot show us the real numbers," Dana said, "because if they show us the real numbers, we will see the transfers. We will see where the $400,000 went, and my guess is, it didn't go into the business. It went into their pockets," I said. "We have them," Dana said. "Now we just need to tighten the screws." I hung up the phone. I looked at the checkbook sitting on my desk. The checkbook connected to the account that held my settlement money. "You wanted a broke sister," I whispered to the empty room. "You are about to find out just how expensive I can be." I picked up my pen and began to write a list. Not of groceries, not of chores, but of everything I needed to do to become the owner of the house on Renfield Lane. Step 1 was complete. I knew their secret. Step 2. I would let them think they were safe, right up until the moment the ground opened up beneath them. The winter wind rattled the window pane, but inside, I was finally warm. The freeze was over. The fire was just beginning. The petition was not a scream. It was a whisper that echoed like a gunshot. Dana Whitlock filed the motion in the county probate court on a Tuesday morning. It was a standard legal maneuver, a petition to compel accounting and inventory, but in the polite, suffocating atmosphere of Briar Glen, it was a declaration of war. We were formally challenging the validity of the estate documents and demanding a full forensic review of Stewart Ridge Holdings. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, my phone began to vibrate. It did not stop. I was sitting in the small rental cottage I had taken on the outskirts of town, away from the prying eyes of the neighbors on Renfield Lane. I watched the screen light up with Tabitha's name. Once, twice, 5 times. I finally answered on the 6th ring. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the kitchen table, continuing to fold my laundry. "You ungrateful, vindictive little brat." Tabitha's voice was so high-pitched it distorted the speaker. "Hello, Tabitha," I said, smoothing a sweater. "How dare you?" she screamed. "After everything we tried to do for you? After we offered you cash out of our own pockets? You file a lawsuit? You are suing your own family?" "I am not suing anyone yet," I said calmly. "I am asking for paperwork. If everything is as clean as you say, it should take you 10 minutes to print the records. You are unstable. Serenity? Mom was right about you. You are having one of your episodes. Do you need money for drugs? Is that what this is? Are you in debt to some dealer in the city?" I paused, my hand hovering over the fabric. The accusation was so specific, so rehearsed. "I am hanging up now. Tabitha, have your lawyer call mine. Don't you dare hang up on me. I am telling everyone. Serenity. I am telling Aunt Clara. I am telling the Reverend. Everyone is going to know that you are attacking your grieving family because you are off your meds and broke." I ended the call. The silence that followed was heavy. But it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a bridge burning, and I found I didn't mind the smoke. The smear campaign began the next morning. It was subtle at first. I went to the local grocery store, and Mrs. Higgins, who had known me since kindergarten, turned her cart down the aisle to avoid me. When I went to the post office, the clerk gave me a look of pity mixed with fear, as if I might start screaming at any moment. Tabitha was working fast. She was painting me as a volatile, greedy wreck who was terrorizing her noble siblings. But while Tabitha was busy managing public opinion, Dana and I were managing the facts. We went to see Miles Harker again. This time, we didn't make an appointment. Miles's secretary tried to stop us, claiming he was in a meeting, but Dana simply walked past her and opened the heavy oak door. Miles was alone, staring out the window, looking like a man whose retirement plans were rapidly evaporating. He turned, startled, spilling a drop of coffee on his tie. "Ms. Whitlock," he said, his voice trembling. "Serenity, you can't just barge in here. All communication must go through litigation counsel now." "We are not here to litigate, Miles," Dana said, closing the door and leaning against it. She didn't sit. She stood tall, a shark in a tailored suit. "We are here to give you a chance to correct the record before the deposition subpoena lands on your desk next week." "I don't know what you mean," Miles stammered. I stepped forward. I didn't look angry. I looked disappointed. "Miles, you have known me since I was 6 years old. You gave me my first savings bond." He flinched. "Serenity, please." "Tabitha says Mom wanted it simple," I said. "She says Mom thought I was unstable, but you and I both know Mom was meticulous. She never signed anything without reading it 3 times. So tell me, Miles, did you actually sit there and watch her sign that amendment? Or did Tabitha bring it to you already signed?" Miles sank into his chair. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked old. "It was the week before she died," he whispered. "She was in and out of the hospital. Tabitha called me 5 times a day. She was frantic. She said Marla was worried about the business. She said Marla wanted to consolidate the assets to protect them from external liabilities." "And she brought you the papers?" Dana asked sharply. "She said Marla signed them at the house," Miles admitted, his voice barely audible. "She said she didn't want to drag me out there in the snow. I have known the family for 40 years. I didn't think Tabitha would." "You didn't think," Dana finished for him. "You let a beneficiary facilitate the execution of a will that solely benefited her. That is malpractice, Miles, at best." "She pressured me," Miles said, looking up with wet eyes. "She said if I didn't get it filed, the estate would be stuck in probate for years and the creditors would eat everything. She said she was trying to save the house." "Save the house from what?" I asked. Miles clamped his mouth shut. He realized he had said too much. "I can't say any more. You have to leave." We left. As we walked to the car, Dana was practically vibrating with energy. "He is scared," she said. "He knows he didn't witness those signatures. That affidavit of execution is garbage." "He mentioned creditors," I said. "He said Tabitha was trying to save the house." "Which brings us to the handwriting expert," Dana said. We met the expert, a man named Dr. Thorne, in a rented conference room at the library. He was a small man with thick glasses and a demeanor that suggested he preferred paper to people. He had my mother's old letters, thank you notes, birthday cards, spread out on one side of the table, and the high-resolution scans of the contested will amendment on the other. "It is fascinating," Dr. Thorne said, hovering a magnifying glass over the documents. "Truly fascinating. Is it a forgery?" I asked. "I cannot use that word definitively in a court of law just yet," he said. "Forgery implies intent, which is a legal conclusion. However, I can tell you about simulation." He pointed to the amendment. "Look at the tremor in the ascender of the letter L in Marla," he said, "in her genuine signatures from this period. Even when she was ill, the tremor is rhythmic. It is a neurological tremor, consistent." He slid the magnifying glass to the will. "Here, the tremor is jagged. It stops and starts. This is what we call a drawn tremor. It happens when someone is moving the pen slowly, trying to copy a shape. Rather than writing a name they have written 10,000 times, it is too careful. It lacks the velocity of a genuine signature." "So someone traced it?" Dana asked. "Or practiced it until they got it close enough to pass a casual glance?" Dr. Thorne said, "There are also hesitation marks, little dots of ink where the pen rested while the writer checked their work. Marla Stewart did not hesitate when she signed her name. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to load the weapon. The next piece of the puzzle came from a place I hadn't expected, the bank, or rather, the lending office. I went to the local branch of Hearthstone Lending. It was located in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner, far less prestigious than the marble-columned bank my parents had always used. I walked in wearing my broke coat, looking every bit the confused, grieving daughter. The clerk was a young man named Jason, with gelled hair and a name tag that was slightly crooked. "I am here about the Stewart account," I said, putting my ID on the counter. "My mother passed away recently, and there seems to be some confusion about the paperwork." Jason typed my name into the system. "Serenity Stewart. Oh, right. I saw the memo. We are supposed to direct inquiries to the executor." "I know," I said, leaning in and lowering my voice. "And I don't want to cause trouble. But my sister Tabitha is so stressed. She is screaming at everyone. I just wanted to check if the authorized signers list was updated correctly so I don't have to bother her. She mentioned she uploaded the docs late at night?" Jason softened. He looked tired too. Dealing with aggressive clients was likely part of his daily grind. "Yeah, tell me about it," he muttered. "That account has been a headache. We had 5 different uploads come in at 2 a.m. the week before the closing. The system flagged them for review because the IP address was different from the original applicant." "Different?" I asked. "Yeah, the original application came from the house IP," Jason said, tapping his screen. "But the final docs with the authorized signers list? Those came from a mobile hotspot, probably someone working remotely, and the list was weird." "Weird how?" "Usually, you add a spouse," Jason said, "or a business partner, but this added 2 managers with full power of attorney just for the transaction, Tabitha Stewart and Graham Stewart. It was pushed through as an emergency addendum to the refinance." "And the loan?" I asked, holding my breath. "Is it in good standing?" Jason grimaced. "Technically, but that balloon payment is glowing red in the system. Due in 5 months, $390,000 and change. If that doesn't clear, the foreclosure notice prints automatically. The system doesn't care about family tragedies." I thanked him and walked out, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't just a loan. It was a lifeline they had thrown themselves. And now it was turning into a noose. They had used the house, the symbol of our family, the only thing of real value left, as leverage to get quick cash. And the balloon payment was the cliff they were driving toward. They needed to cut me out because if I was a beneficiary, I would have seen the loan documents. I would have seen that the equity was gone. They needed to hide the debt as much as they needed to steal the asset. I met Ruth Ellison that evening at her office. The city lights were blinking on below us, a stark contrast to the quiet darkness of Briar Glen. "You have options," Ruth said. She had drawn a diagram on a whiteboard. It looked like a battle plan. "Option A," she said, pointing to the left. "We fight in court. We use the handwriting analysis. We depose Miles. We prove fraud. It will take 2 years. The legal fees will eat up a significant portion of the estate, and in the meantime, the balloon payment hits. Since the estate is frozen in litigation, no one pays it. The lender forecloses. The house is sold at auction for pennies on the dollar. You win the moral victory, and you get a check for 1/3 of nothing." "Option B?" I asked. "Option B," Ruth said, pointing to the right. "We play offense. Hearthstone Lending is a volume lender. They don't want to own a house in Briar Glen. They want their cash. If they think the loan is shaky, they will sell the note to a secondary buyer to get it off their books. And I become the buyer," I said, "through the shell company we set up." Ruth nodded. "You buy the debt. You become the bank. You don't have to foreclose. You can hold the note. You can demand payment. You can dictate the terms." "If I own the debt," I said slowly, "I own the house." "Effectively," Ruth said, "you control its fate. If they can't pay you, and we know they can't, you have the legal right to take possession." I stared at the whiteboard. "It feels cruel," I said. "It feels like I'm becoming the villain they say I am, buying their home out from under them. That is something a corporate raider does, not a sister." Dana, who was sitting on the sofa reviewing files, looked up. "Serenity," she said sharp and clear, "they stole from you. They lied to your dying mother. They are currently telling the entire town that you are a drug addict. Defending yourself isn't cruelty. It is refusing to be sacrificed. You are not taking their home. You are securing the asset they have already gambled away. If you don't buy that note, a stranger will, and a stranger won't care about your childhood memories." She is right, Ruth said, gentle but firm. This isn't revenge. It is rescue. You are the only one with the capital to save the ship. They just don't know you are the captain yet. I nodded. Okay. Prepare the purchase. If Hearthstone sells, we buy. I drove back to the rental cottage late that night. The snow had started to fall again, large silent flakes that covered the windshield. When I got inside, my laptop was blinking. A notification. I opened it. It was an email to my personal address. The subject line was blank. The sender was a burner address. truthteller884@protonmail.com. I opened it. There was no greeting, just one sentence. Check the storage unit on Baymore Drive. Unit 14C. The code is 5529. I stared at the screen. Baymore Drive was a row of cheap self-storage units on the industrial side of town. Who sent this? I hesitated. It could be a trap, but my curiosity was a physical pull, stronger than my fear. I grabbed a flashlight and got back in the car. The storage facility was deserted. The gate was broken, stuck half open. I drove through. Unit 14C was in the back row, hidden in the shadows. I got out, the wind biting at my face. I punched in the code, 52529. The lock clicked. The light turned green. I rolled the metal door up. It rumbled loudly in the quiet night. I shone my flashlight inside. It wasn't full of furniture. It was full of boxes. Banker's boxes. I opened the first one. It was filled with Stewart Ridge Holdings paperwork, old invoices, receipts, but then I saw the folders marked drafts. I pulled one out. My hands started to shake. It was a draft of the will amendment, but it wasn't just one. There were 10 versions. Some had handwriting on them. Tabitha's sharp, angular scrawl, too formal. One note said next to a paragraph about my mother's love for me, make it sound more like Mom. Add the part about Serenity being overwhelmed. Another note said, need to justify the exclusion. They had workshopped it. They had treated my mother's final wishes like a marketing copy, editing and refining the language to make the theft sound like benevolence. I dug deeper. In the bottom of the box, I found a discarded witness list. It had names crossed out. People they had considered asking to witness the forgery, but decided were too risky. And then I found the memo. It was a single sheet of paper, typed, with a header that read, Strategy Meeting, October. That was 3 months before Mom died. I read it, and bile rose in my throat. Subject, the Serenity problem. Objective, secure full control of SRH and the primary residence to leverage for the Hearthstone balloon payment. Risk assessment. Serenity is unpredictable but financially weak. She has no resources for a legal fight. If we frame the exclusion as protective, mental health angle, she is unlikely to challenge. She craves approval. If we offer her a small settlement, she will take it. Action item. Isolate Mom. Limit Serenity's visits. Begin narrative seeding with extended family regarding Serenity's instability. It was signed with initials, TS and GS. I dropped the paper as if it were burning. I leaned against the cold metal wall of the storage unit, breathing hard. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It wasn't a panic move made in the wake of grief. It was a premeditated, calculated conspiracy. They had planned this while my mother was still making tea in her kitchen. They had discussed my instability like a line item on a spreadsheet. They had counted on my poverty. They had banked on my weakness. I looked at the boxes. This was the smoking gun. This was the proof that would destroy them in court. But as I stood there in the freezing dark, I realized I didn't just want to win a lawsuit. A lawsuit was clean. A lawsuit was impersonal. They had turned my life into a business calculation. I picked up the memo and folded it carefully into my pocket. I would do the same to them. I pulled out my phone and texted Ruth. Authorized. 1 word. That was all it took. I closed the storage unit door and locked it. I would come back for the boxes later. Right now, I had a house to buy. I walked into the offices of Stewart Ridge Holdings on a Wednesday morning that was gray enough to drain the color from the brick buildings downtown. The office was small. A converted storefront with a faux historic facade that Graham was inordinately proud of. I hadn't been inside in 2 years. It smelled the same: commercial carpet cleaner and the sharp, metallic tang of cheap coffee. Tabitha and Graham were in the glass-walled conference room. They weren't working. Tabitha was examining her cuticles with the intensity of a surgeon, and Graham was staring at his phone, scrolling endlessly. When I opened the door, the air in the room shifted instantly from boredom to defense. "We told you," Graham said without looking up. "All communication goes through Miles." "Miles is busy answering a subpoena," I said, placing my bag on the empty chair. I didn't sit. I stood at the end of the table, my hands resting on the cool mahogany laminate. "And I am not here to negotiate. I am here to give you a courtesy update." Tabitha laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "A courtesy update? From you? That is rich. What, are you going to tell us you found another $20 in your coat pocket?" "I am telling you that the probate court granted our petition this morning," I said. My voice was level, stripped of the tremor I used to have when confronting them. "The judge has ordered full disclosure of all Stewart Ridge financial records going back 5 years, not a summary, the raw data, bank statements, canceled checks, vendor invoices." Graham stopped scrolling. He looked up, his face paling slightly. "That is invasive. It is a private company." "It is an asset of the estate you are trying to steal," I corrected. "And regarding the will, Dr. Thorne, the forensic document examiner, has completed his preliminary review of the amendment. He has identified 14 points of simulation in Mom's signature. He is ready to testify that the signature is a drawing, not a genuine act of writing." The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator in the break room seemed deafening. Tabitha stood up slowly. She smoothed her skirt, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no fear in them, only a cold, hard pity. "You really don't get it, do you, Serenity?" she said softly. "You think facts matter. You think courts matter. Look at you. You are wearing boots you bought 3 seasons ago. You drive a rental car. You have no husband, no career that anyone understands, and a history of, let's call it, emotional fragility." She walked around the table until she was standing inches from me. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume. "You won't win," she whispered, "because nobody believes you. I had coffee with the judge's wife yesterday. She thinks it is tragic how you are harassing us. She thinks you are desperate for drug money. By the time this gets to a hearing, your name will be mud in this town. You can have all the experts you want. We are the Stewarts. You are just the mess we tried to clean up." I looked at her. I saw the arrogance that had been fed to her since birth. The absolute certainty that she was the protagonist of reality and I was merely a malfunction. "We will see," I said. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, catching a glimpse of Graham burying his face in his hands before the latch clicked. Tabitha's confidence was a wall, but Dana Whitlock was a battering ram. 2 days later, I was in Dana's office in Cambridge. The view of the Charles River was obscured by snow, but inside, the glow of Dana's monitors provided plenty of light. She had the initial tranche of banking records that Stewart Ridge had been forced to turn over, the ones they couldn't hide because they were tied to the main operating account. "It is sloppy," Dana said, tapping a spreadsheet. "Criminals usually try harder. This is just lazy." "What did you find?" I asked, pulling my chair closer. "See these recurring payments?" Dana pointed to a series of transfers. Every month, roughly $4,000 goes to a vendor called Crestfall Property Services. The memo line says, "Maintenance and repairs, various properties." "I have never heard of them," I said. "Dad always used Miller Brothers for maintenance." "I looked up Crestfall," Dana said. "It is a registered LLC. All right. Registered to a P.O. box in a strip mall in Revere. No website, no business license for contracting, no insurance filings." She clicked open a folder of scanned invoices that had been included in the production. "Look at the invoices. Roof repair, 142 Elm Street. HVAC replacement, 88 Oak Avenue. Generic, No part numbers, no labor hours. So? So, I checked the maintenance logs for those tenants, Dana said, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. The tenant at 142 Elm Street emailed the company 3 times complaining that the roof was leaking and no one had come to fix it. The dates of the complaints are 2 weeks after Crestfall billed $4,000 for fixing it. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They aren't doing the work. No, Dana said. Crestfall is a shell. They are funneling money out of the company, labeling it as an expense to lower the tax liability, and moving it into an account they control. It is classic embezzlement. They are bleeding the company dry to fund their lifestyle. $4,000 a month, I murmured. That is Tabitha's country club dues. That is the lease on Graham's car. It gets worse, Dana said. The frequency of the payments increased 6 months ago, right around the time the refinance money from the house probably ran out. They are accelerating the drain. They are looting the ship before it sinks, I said. And they are terrified the bank is going to notice, Dana said. Which brings us to the Hearthstone loan. The crisis hit the following Tuesday. I was sitting in my car across the street from the post office, watching Graham collect the mail from the Stewart Ridge box. He rifled through the envelopes, tossing the junk mail into a nearby bin. Then he stopped. He was holding a large, red-bordered envelope, even from 50 feet away. I recognized the logo. Hearthstone Lending. Graham froze. He stood there on the sidewalk, the wind whipping his coat around his legs, staring at the envelope. His hand shook. He pulled his phone out and dialed Tabitha immediately. He was shouting into the phone, his free hand chopping the air. I didn't need to hear the words to know what the letter said. Notice of balloon payment due. The clock had run out. The $400,000 was due in weeks, and they didn't have it because they had spent it on appearances. I waited until Graham sped away. Then I drove to the cafe where I knew Tabitha held court. She was there, sitting with 2 other women, laughing too loudly. But when Graham walked in and slapped the envelope on the table, the laughter died. I watched from the counter as I ordered a black coffee. They whispered. They argued. Tabitha hissed something at him. Her face contorted in a way she never showed the public. Graham looked like he was about to vomit. They were scrambling. They would try to refinance again. But with the interest rates up and the company books showing expenses like Crestfall, no traditional bank would touch them. They were toxic borrowers. That afternoon, I initiated the protocol we had prepared. I sat in a conference room at Meriton Capital Brokerage, a boutique firm in Boston that Ruth had connected me with. The broker, a man named Mr. Silas, sat across from me. He was professional, discreet, and expensive. We have reached out to the secondary desk at Hearthstone Lending, Mr. Silas said, adjusting his cufflinks. As you suspected, they are eager to offload the Stewart note. They consider it distressed. Due to the payment history irregularities and the impending balloon date, they don't want the hassle of a foreclosure in a small town. It is bad PR. What is the price? I asked. They are willing to sell the note at 92 cents on the dollar. Mr. Silas said, they just want out. The total purchase price, including fees, will be $385,000. I nodded. It was a bargain. I was buying a house worth $800,000 for less than half its value, simply because my siblings had mismanaged the debt. And my anonymity? I asked. Guaranteed. Mr. Silas said, Meriton Capital will be the recorded holder of the note. We act as the servicer. Your name appears nowhere on the public registry. As far as the Stewarts know, their mortgage was sold to an investment fund. It happens every day. Do it, I said. Prepare the paperwork. I want to close by Friday. Very good, Mr. Silas said. Control of the timeline is yours. I left the meeting feeling a strange mix of power and nausea. I was holding the sword now. I could drop it whenever I chose. But before the sword fell, life offered a complication I hadn't accounted for. I was at the grocery store in Briar Glen, buying milk, when I turned the corner of the cereal aisle and nearly collided with Elise, Graham's wife. Elise was a soft woman, kind in a way that didn't fit the sharp edges of the Stewart family. She looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She was holding a box of generic toasted oats. "Serenity," she breathed, her eyes widening. She looked around nervously, as if speaking to me was a crime. "Hello, Elise," I said gently. "How are the boys?" Elise's face crumbled. She abandoned her cart and stepped close to me, lowering her voice. "They are fine. They miss their Aunt Wren," she said, her voice trembling. "Serenity, I don't know what is happening. Graham won't talk to me. He just paces the floor at night. He says you are trying to destroy us." "I am not trying to destroy anyone, Elise," I said. "He says you are suing for money we don't have," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "He says we might lose the house. Not the big house. Our house. He says if the company goes under, we lose everything." She grabbed my hand. Her palm was cold. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear. Serenity, I didn't know how bad it was. I thought the business was doing well. I see the cars, the dinners. I thought it was real. But Graham, he is scared. He is crying in the bathroom when he thinks I'm asleep." I looked at this woman, who had always been kind to me, who had sent me Christmas cards, even when Tabitha told her not to. "I am not asking you to forgive them," Elise said, tightening her grip. "I know how they treated you. I know it was wrong. But please, the kids, they need a home. Don't destroy their stability because you are angry at Graham." I squeezed her hand back. "Elise, listen to me. I promise you, I will not let you or the boys end up on the street. I will not harm the innocent people in this mess. But I cannot let them keep stealing from me. I have to draw a line." "Just offer them a way out?" she pleaded. "A way that leaves them some dignity? For the boys?" "I will offer them options," I said. "Fair options, more than they gave me, but I won't surrender my rights. Elise, not anymore." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you. That is all I can ask." She hurried away before anyone could see us, leaving me standing next to the cereal with a heavy heart. The collateral damage. It was the only thing that gave me pause. But letting them continue their fraud would only lead to a bigger crash later, one that would definitely wipe Elise out. Stopping them now was the only way to save anything. The next day, Tabitha called. Her voice was different. The screeching rage was gone, replaced by a sugary, cloying warmth that set my teeth on edge. "Serenity," she cooed. "I was thinking, we have been so disconnected, with the lawyers and everything. It is just so ugly. Why don't you come over to the house? Just us. Walk through the rooms. Remember the good times. Mom wouldn't want us fighting." It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. Dana knew it was a trap. "Go," Dana had said. "Wear a wire if you can. But mostly, watch her hands. Desperate people try to manufacture evidence when the real evidence fails." I didn't wear a wire, illegal in Massachusetts without consent. But I went with my senses on high alert. The house was warm. Tabitha had lit a fire in the living room. She offered me tea and Mom's good china. "Remember when we used to slide down the banister?" Tabitha asked, leading me into the hallway. She laughed, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You were always the brave one, Wren, always jumping off first." She was rewriting history again. I wasn't the brave one. I was the one they pushed. "I remember," I said. She led me into the study. Mom's desk was still there, though the spot where the lockbox had been was painfully empty. "I found these old photos," Tabitha said, gesturing to a stack of albums on the desk. "Look at this one of you and Dad." She kept me talking. She kept pointing things out, trying to leverage nostalgia to soften me up. "We are family, Serenity. Families fight, but they don't sue. You know Graham loves you. He is just stressed." I almost cracked. Standing there, smelling the old books, hearing the floorboards creak, I felt the pull of the little sister who just wanted to be included. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to drop the lawsuit and hug her and pretend everything was fine. Then I saw it. Tabitha was standing by the desk. She thought I was looking at a photo of the beach house. but I was watching her reflection in the glass of the bookcase. Her hand moved quickly. She pulled a blue folder from the side pocket of her oversized cardigan. She slid it smoothly into the bottom of a stack of financial papers that were sitting on the corner of the desk. Papers she had accidentally left out. She turned back to me, smiling. "I am just so glad you came. Serenity, I will go get more hot water for the tea." She walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the bait. My heart hammered. I walked to the desk. I lifted the top few papers, electric bills, junk mail. I pulled out the blue folder she had planted. I opened it. It was a document titled Loan Repayment Agreement. It was dated 3 years ago. It stated that Serenity Stewart acknowledged a debt of $50,000 owed to Marla Stewart for personal expenses and debt consolidation, and that this amount was to be deducted from any future inheritance. It was signed. My signature was at the bottom. I stared at it. It was a good forgery, better than the will. They must have lifted my signature from an old birthday card or a check. The audacity of it took my breath away. This was their backup plan. If the will contest went badly, they would produce this found document. Oh, look. Serenity owed Mom money anyway. That is why she didn't get the house. It was a wash. They were trying to frame me for a debt I never incurred. I didn't scream. I didn't wait for the tea. I took the folder. I put it in my bag. When Tabitha came back in with the teapot, I was standing by the door, my coat buttoned. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, her eyes darting to the desk. She noticed the stack was disturbed. A flicker of panic crossed her face. "I have seen enough, Tabitha," I said. "Thank you for the tour. It brought back a lot of memories. Some of them were even real." I walked out. As I reached my car, I saw her running to the window, watching me. She checked the desk. She saw the folder was gone. I saw her mouth open in a silent scream. I drove straight to Dana's. "This is it," Dana said, holding the fake loan agreement with tweezers. "This is attempt to defraud the estate. This is creating false evidence. This is a felony. File the motion," I said. "Stop them from shredding anything else." Dana filed an emergency motion for preservation of evidence that afternoon. She attached a sworn affidavit from me detailing the attempted plant. The judge, who had already been annoyed by their stonewalling, was furious. He issued an order within 2 hours. All estate materials, all Stewart Ridge records, and all personal financial records of the executor were to be surrendered to a court-appointed master within 24 hours. Any destruction of documents would result in immediate contempt charges and potential jail time. The legal noose was tight. Now it was time to pull the financial trapdoor. My phone rang. It was Mr. Silas from Meriton Capital. "Ms. Stewart," he said. "We have the final agreement from Hearthstone. They have accepted the offer. They are ready to assign the note." I sat in my rental cottage, the wind howling outside. The blue folder with the fake debt was sitting on my table, a testament to how far my family would go to hurt me. If I signed this authorization, I would own the debt. I would own the leverage. I would become the invisible force controlling their fate. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about safety. If I didn't control the house, they would lose it to a stranger, or they would burn it down trying to save themselves. "Do it," I said. "Buy the note." "Transferring funds now," Mr. Silas said. "Congratulations, Ms. Stewart. You are now the secured lender for the property at Renfield Lane." I hung up. I closed my eyes. I was the bank. I was the landlord. I was the sister they had mocked, the broke girl they had tried to erase. And next week, payment was due. The notification arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, a digital ping that sounded no different from a weather alert or a spam email. But the content of the message from Mr. Silas at Meriton Capital was heavy enough to crack the foundation of my family's world. "Transaction complete. The assignment of mortgage has been recorded. You are the secured creditor." I sat in my rental cottage, staring at the screen. I did not feel a rush of triumph. I did not feel the thrill of the conqueror. I felt a profound, heavy silence. I was now the owner of the debt that hung over Renfield Lane, the house where I had taken my first steps, the house where my mother had died, and the house where my siblings were currently living a lie was now, effectively, mine to control. Ruth Ellison called me 10 minutes later. "It is done," she said. "We have the note. The balloon payment is due in 5 months, but as the note holder, you have the right to call the loan if there are material breaches of the contract, and given the financial irregularities we have found, you could technically declare default tomorrow." "I don't want to declare default," I said. "I want to declare a truce, or at least offer one." "Dana has drafted the letter," Ruth said. "It is strict, it is legal, it removes all emotion from the equation. Serenity. You must listen to me. Do not go over there. Do not call them. Send the letter via courier. Let the paper speak. If you go in person, Tabitha will find a way to make it a screaming match, and you will lose the high ground." "I know," I said. "Send it." The letter was delivered to Renfield Lane at 4 in the afternoon. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine the scene, the courier van pulling up, Graham signing for the thick envelope. The confusion as they saw the return address was not Hearthstone Lending, but Meriton Capital, acting on behalf of the new note holder, and then, the second envelope inside, addressed personally to them. From me. I had spent hours refining the offer with Dana. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to give them a ladder to climb out of the hole they had dug, provided they were willing to admit they had been digging. The letter outlined 3 clear options. Option 1. Refinance. They could find another lender, pay off the $400,000 plus the legal fees and interest I had incurred, and buy out my rightful 1/3 share of the estate. If they did this, I would walk away. Option 2. Sale. We would agree to list the house on the open market immediately. The proceeds would pay off the debt I now held, and the remainder would be split fairly between the 3 of us. After a forensic audit determined how much they had already stolen from the company. Option 3. Settlement. They would sign a binding settlement acknowledging their misconduct regarding the will and the company funds. They would step down from the management of Stewart Ridge Holdings, allowing an independent administrator to take over. In exchange, I would restructure the loan to give them 2 years to find a new living arrangement, with no immediate eviction. It was generous. It was far more mercy than they had shown me when they handed me a tray of cold lasagna and a fake narrative about my sanity. I waited. The explosion didn't happen in private. Tabitha was incapable of keeping a crisis within 4 walls because she needed an audience to validate her victimhood. It happened 2 days later, at Aunt Clara's annual post-Christmas dinner. It was a tradition that had survived my mother's death. A gathering of cousins and second cousins in a crowded, overheated dining room filled with the smell of roast beef and stale perfume. I hadn't planned to go, but Aunt Clara had called me, her voice frail and insistent, begging me to come. "Your mother would want the family together," she had said. So I went. I wore a new dress, simple and black, and I held my head high. When I walked in, the room went quiet. Tabitha was holding court near the punch bowl, a glass of wine in her hand. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with a manic energy. Graham was standing behind her, looking like a man awaiting a firing squad. "She is here," Tabitha announced, her voice cutting through the silence. "The new landlord." She walked toward me, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. "Hello, Tabitha," I said. "Hello, Aunt Clara." "Don't you say hello to her," Tabitha snapped, turning to the room. "You all think Serenity is the grieving daughter. You think she is the poor, struggling artist we have been trying to help. Well, let me tell you what she really is." "Tabitha, stop," Graham hissed. Reaching for her arm, she shook him off. "No, Graham, they need to know." Tabitha pointed a shaking finger at me. "She went behind our backs. She used some secret money she has been hiding from the family. Money she probably got illegally. And she bought the mortgage on our house, my house, Graham's house, the house our children sleep in." A gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Clara put a hand to her chest. "She bought the debt," Tabitha screamed, tears now streaming down her face. And now she's threatening to throw us out on the street in the middle of winter. She sent us a letter demanding we leave or pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars we don't have. She is a monster. She is doing this out of spite because Mom didn't trust her with the money." The eyes of the room turned to me. I saw judgment. I saw confusion. I saw the successful planting of the unstable serenity seed blooming into full belief. I felt the old panic rise, the urge to shrink, to apologize, to run. But then I remembered the storage unit. I remembered the memo. Action item. Isolate Mom. I took a breath. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I looked Tabitha dead in the eye. "I offered you 3 options. Tabitha," I said. My voice was calm, carrying to the back of the room. "None of them involved throwing you out on the street. One of them involved giving you 2 years to get back on your feet." "Liar," she shrieked. "Ask to see the letter." I said to the room. I turned my gaze to Aunt Clara, then to the cousins. "If she is telling the truth, ask her to show you the letter I sent. It is in writing. It is notarized. Ask her why she's afraid to show you the actual terms." Tabitha froze. She hadn't expected me to speak. She expected me to crumble. I don't carry legal papers to dinner," she stammered. "No," I said, "but you carry lies, and I'm done paying for them." I turned and walked out of the house. I didn't stay for the roast beef. I didn't stay for the whispers. I walked out into the cold night air, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they said about me. I knew the truth, and I had the receipts. The next week, the legal machinery began to grind them down. Dana Whitlock convened the depositions in the conference room of a neutral law firm in Boston. Tabitha and Graham had hired a new lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who looked expensive and aggressive, but even he couldn't stop the avalanche of facts. Miles Harker was the first to fall, under oath, with a video camera recording his every twitch. Miles looked like a ghost. Dana was relentless. She didn't yell, she just asked questions. "Mr. Harker," Dana said, adjusting her glasses, "did you witness Marla Stewart sign the amendment to her will on November 14th? It is standard practice to... Yes or no? Mr. Harker, were you physically present in the room when the pen touched the paper?" Miles looked at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling stared at the ceiling. "No," Miles whispered. "And yet, you signed an affidavit stating that you were," Dana said. "You notarized a signature you did not witness. You filed a document with the probate court that you knew contained a false attestation." "Tabitha said it was urgent," Miles blurted out, sweat beading on his forehead. "She said Marla was agitated. She said they just needed to get it done to save the house from creditors. She pushed me. She called me every hour." "So you committed perjury because you were annoyed?" Dana asked. "I thought I was helping," Miles said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know they were going to cut Serenity out completely. I thought it was just administrative." Next was Dr. Thorne, the handwriting expert. His testimony was technical, precise, and devastating. "The signature is a simulation," he stated, pointing to the enlarged projections on the wall. "The pen lifts, the tremor quality, and the pressure points all indicate that this was drawn by someone attempting to mimic the decedent's hand. It is not a natural signature. In my professional opinion, it is a forgery." Tabitha sat at the end of the table, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin white line. She wouldn't look at the screen. She wouldn't look at me. But the final blow didn't come from the experts. It came from the past. 2 days after the deposition, Dana received a sealed package from the court. The anonymous emailer, Truth-Teller884, had come forward. His name was Oliver Keene. He was a former bookkeeper for Stewart Ridge Holdings, a quiet man who had retired 6 months ago. He had submitted a sworn affidavit to the court in exchange for immunity. Dana read it to me in her office. "I was instructed by Tabitha Stewart and Graham Stewart to create a vendor profile for Crestfall Property Services." The affidavit read, "I was told to generate monthly invoices for maintenance work that was never performed. I was told to code these expenses as capital improvements to reduce the tax burden. When I questioned the legality, Graham Stewart told me that it was a temporary measure to clean up the cash flow, and that if I didn't do it, I would be implicated in the mismanagement. I feared for my pension. I did what I was told, but I kept copies of the original directives. He has emails, Dana said, looking up from the page. Emails from Graham saying, "Make the numbers work for the refinance." Emails from Tabitha saying, "Hide the Crestfall payments in the general ledger." The judge's reaction was swift and severe. In a hearing the following Monday, the judge ordered a full forensic accounting of Stewart Ridge Holdings to be conducted by a court-appointed auditor. He froze all assets of the company. Then he looked at Tabitha and Graham. "I am referring the matter of the signature and the Crestfall payments to the district attorney's office," the judge said, his voice echoing in the courtroom. "This court handles probate, not criminal fraud, but what I am seeing here suggests perjury, forgery, and embezzlement. You would be well advised to secure criminal defense counsel." Graham put his head on the table and sobbed. Tabitha sat like a stone statue, staring straight ahead, her world disintegrating into dust. Victory should have felt sweet. It should have felt like the end of a movie where the hero stands on a mountain and cheers. Instead, I went home and cried for 4 hours. I didn't want them to go to jail. I didn't want my family to be criminals. I just wanted them to be my family. I wanted them to love me without conditions. I wanted my mother to be alive. I started seeing Dr. Lena Wexford the next week. She was a therapist with a kind face and an office that smelled of lavender. "You are grieving twice," Dr. Wexford told me. "You are grieving the loss of your mother, and you are grieving the loss of the hope that your siblings would ever be who you needed them to be." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "I feel like I am the one destroying them. If I had just taken the $25,000 and walked away, they would be safe. They would still have the house. They would still be happy." "They wouldn't be safe," Dr. Wexford corrected. "The balloon payment was coming whether you were involved or not. The embezzlement was happening whether you knew about it or not. They were driving the car off the cliff. Serenity. You just happened to be the one who grabbed the wheel before it hit the bottom. You didn't break the family. The family was broken long before you bought that note." "Why me?" I asked. "Why was I always the one they targeted?" "Because every system needs a scapegoat to function," she said. "If you are the mess, then they get to be the success. If you are the child, they get to be the adults. By proving you are competent, by proving you are powerful. You didn't just win a lawsuit, you shattered their identity. That is why they hate you right now. Not because you took the money, but because you took their mirror." It was a hard truth, but it was the first thing that made sense. I needed to translate that understanding into action. I couldn't save Tabitha from her own narcissism, and I couldn't save Graham from his cowardice. But there were innocent people in the wreckage. I met Elise for coffee. She looked thinner than before. Her eyes were red-rimmed. He is not doing well," Elise said, staring into her cup. "He sits in the dark. He says he is going to prison." "He might," I said gently, "if he doesn't cooperate." "We have to move," Elise said. "We can't afford the house. Even if you didn't own the note, we couldn't afford it. The company accounts are frozen. We have nothing. Serenity." "You don't have nothing," I said. I slid a check across the table. It was for $10,000, personal funds, not from the estate. "This is for a deposit on a rental," I said. "For you and the boys. Get them out of that house. Elise, it is toxic. Get them into a stable place." Elise looked at the check, then at me. Tears spilled over her cheeks. "Why? After what he did?" "Because those boys are my nephews," I said, "and because I am not them. I don't use money to control people. I use it to help them. But Elise, you have to hear me. I will not keep paying for their lies. This is it. This is the bridge. You have to walk across it." "I will," she whispered. "I told Graham last night. I told him he has to settle. I told him if he fights you one more day, I am taking the kids and leaving." "Good," I said. "Push him. He needs to stop listening to Tabitha and start listening to reality. Tabitha, however, was not done fighting, but her fight had changed. It was no longer a frontal assault. It was a desperate, back-alley negotiation. She texted me 2 days later, "Meet me, the old park by the high school, alone." I went. It was a bleak, gray afternoon. The swings were creaking in the wind. Tabitha was sitting on a bench, wrapped in her expensive coat, looking out at the empty baseball field. She didn't stand up when I approached. "You win," she said flatly. "It wasn't a game, Tabitha," I said. "It is always a game," she snapped, turning to look at me. Her face was haggard. The perfect makeup couldn't hide the lines of exhaustion. "Fine. You want the house? Take it. You want the company? Take it. It is worthless anyway." "I want the truth," I said. "Here is the deal," Tabitha said, ignoring me. "I have drafted a statement. It says that the signature discrepancies were a misunderstanding due to Mom's failing motor skills. It says that the Crestfall payments were authorized verbal contracts that were poorly documented. You sign it. You tell the judge you accept this explanation. You drop the push for criminal charges." "And in exchange?" I asked, though I already knew. "In exchange, we sign the settlement," she said. "We give you the house. We walk away. But you have to clean up the record. Serenity, you have to tell everyone that you misunderstood. You have to fix our reputation." I looked at her, even now, standing on the edge of the abyss. She was trying to barter with counterfeit coin. She didn't care about the money. She cared about the story. She couldn't bear the thought of Briar Glen knowing she was a fraud. "You want me to lie," I said. "I want you to be a sister," she hissed. "I want you to protect the family name." "The family name is already ruined. Tabitha," I said. "You ruined it when you stole from a dying woman. You ruined it when you embezzled money to buy status. I didn't do that. You did. If you don't do this," she threatened, her voice dropping, "I will make sure everyone knows you are the one who sent your brother to jail. I will make sure you are a pariah." "I am already a pariah," I said, "and I am fine with it." I stepped closer to her. "No deal. Tabitha, I won't lie for you. I won't say I misunderstood. I understood perfectly. You thought I was weak. You thought I was broke. And you were wrong. Serenity, please," she cracked, her voice breaking into a sob. "I can't be the one who lost everything. I can't." "Then you should have thought of that before you picked up the pen and signed Mom's name," I said. I turned around and walked away. The wind was cold, but my conscience was clear. I left her sitting on the bench, a queen without a kingdom, weeping for a version of herself that had never really existed. The truth was not negotiable. Not anymore. The final hearing took place on a Tuesday that felt more like an execution than a legal proceeding. The sky outside the probate court was a bruised purple, heavy with a storm that refused to break, and the air inside courtroom 4 was stale, recycled, and thick with tension. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Dana Whitlock. I wore a navy blazer, crisp and tailored, a visual armor I had purchased just for this day. Across the aisle, Tabitha and Graham sat with their new attorney, Mr. Sterling. They looked diminished. Graham was slumped in his chair, staring at his hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Tabitha was upright, rigid, her face a mask of foundation and powder that was beginning to crack around the eyes. The judge, the Honorable Marcus Vane, was a man known for his impatience with family drama. He shuffled the thick stack of motions on his bench, his glasses sliding down his nose. "We are here on the matter of the estate of Marla Stewart," Judge Vane said, his voice dry as dust, "and the cross motions regarding the validity of the testamentary amendment and the petition for forensic accounting. Ms. Whitlock, you may proceed." Dana stood up. She didn't pace. She didn't wave her arms. She stood like a statue, anchoring the room with her calm. "Your Honor," Dana began, "the narrative presented by the respondents is one of administrative necessity. They claim that cutting Serenity Stewart out of her mother's estate was a protective measure. designed to shield a fragile beneficiary from the complexities of wealth. They claim that the frantic restructuring of Stewart Ridge Holdings was merely efficient management. She paused, letting the silence settle. But the evidence tells a different story. The evidence shows that Marla Stewart, a woman known for her meticulous obsession with fairness, purportedly signed a document that violated her lifelong principles, and she did so with a signature that forensic experts have identified as a simulation. The evidence shows that Stewart Ridge Holdings, the family's primary asset, was being drained of $4,000 a month through a shell company, Crestfall Property Services, to pay for the personal luxuries of the respondents. And the evidence shows that the family home, the crown jewel of the estate, was leveraged to the hilt in a secret refinance that is now facing a balloon payment of nearly $400,000. Tabitha flinched. Graham closed his eyes. "This was not estate planning," Dana said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "This was a liquidation. The respondents needed the entirety of the estate not to protect Serenity Stewart, but to cover the tracks of their own insolvency. They needed a scapegoat to explain the missing equity. So they invented a story about their sister's instability." Mr. Sterling stood up, smoothing his tie. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is engaging in character assassination. The respondents were acting under extreme duress following the death of their mother." "Overruled," Judge Vane said without looking up. "The court has reviewed the affidavit from Mr. Keene, the former bookkeeper. Duress does not explain the creation of fake vendor invoices 6 months prior to the decedent's death." Mr. Sterling sat down, looking defeated. Dana turned to look at me, then back to the judge. "Finally, Your Honor, we must address the issue of the mortgage. The respondents have argued that Serenity Stewart is a financial liability. They have publicly accused her of being broke and seeking to drain the estate for personal debts. However, I am submitting into the record today the assignment of the mortgage note for the property at Renfield Lane." Dana handed a document to the bailiff. "As of last week," Dana continued, "the secured creditor for the family home is not Hearthstone Lending. It is an entity fully capitalized and controlled by Serenity Stewart. My client did not attack the estate. She purchased its debt to prevent a foreclosure that the respondent's negligence made inevitable. She is not the liability, Your Honor. She is the bank." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting. The air left the room. Judge Vane picked up the document. He read it slowly. Then he looked over his glasses at Tabitha and Graham. "Is this true?" he asked Mr. Sterling. "Does the plaintiff hold the note?" We were not aware of the identity of the purchaser until this moment." Mr. Sterling stammered. Judge Vane set the paper down. He took off his glasses. "This court has seen many things," the judge said, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. "But I rarely see a case where the arrogance of the defense is matched so perfectly by their incompetence." He leaned forward. "I am setting aside the contested amendment to the will, pending a full trial on the forgery allegations. The estate will revert to the terms of the prior will, which divides all assets equally among the 3 children. Furthermore, I am removing Tabitha Stewart and Graham Stewart as executors immediately. I am appointing an independent administrator to manage the estate, and Stewart Ridge Holdings." Tabitha let out a strangled sound, a gasp that was half sob. "The administrator will conduct a full audit," Judge Vane continued. "Any funds found to have been misappropriated through Crestfall Property Services or other vehicles will be deducted from the respondent's share of the estate. If the misappropriation exceeds their share, a civil judgment will be entered against them personally. And I'm warning you now, if the audit confirms criminal fraud, I will be forwarding the entire file to the district attorney." He looked at me. "Ms. Stewart, regarding the mortgage note, you are the legal holder. You have the right to foreclose if the terms are not met. However, given the family dynamics, I am ordering a 30-day stay on any foreclosure proceedings to allow for settlement talks. But make no mistake, you control the asset." The gavel banged. It was over. We moved to the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Tabitha was leaning against the wall, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Graham was standing next to Elise, who had come for moral support. Elise looked relieved. Graham looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, bad dream to find the reality was worse. I walked over to them. Dana stayed a few feet back, a silent sentinel. "You did this," Tabitha hissed, her eyes wild. "You planned this. You let us think you were poor so you could humiliate us." "I didn't plan anything. Tabitha," I said. "I reacted. You set the house on fire. I just bought the ashes." "Why?" she cried, her voice cracking, echoing in the marble corridor. "Why couldn't you just take the $25,000? Why couldn't you just go away?" "Because it wasn't fair," I said. Tabitha laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. "Fair? You want fair? Fair is that I spent 40 years being perfect. I was the one who stayed in Briar Glen. I was the one who joined the committees. I was the one who made sure the Stewart name meant something. You left. Serenity. You went to the city and lived your messy little life. Why should you get the same as me?" "Is that what this was?" I asked softly. "You stole Mom's money because you thought you earned it by being, what, popular?" "I refinanced because we were drowning," Tabitha screamed, finally breaking. The mask fell away completely. "The club dues, the cars, the tuition. Do you know what it costs to be us, Serenity? Do you have any idea the pressure? Mom knew. She knew we needed the help. She would have wanted me to have it." "Mom wanted fairness," I said. "She told me that herself." "Mom didn't know what it was like," Tabitha sobbed, sliding down the wall until she was crouching on the floor, her expensive skirt pooling around her. "I had to win. Serenity, don't you get it? In this town, if you aren't winning, you are dying. And someone had to be the loser so I could be the winner. It had to be you. It was always you." I looked down at my sister. I saw the terror that drove her, the absolute, crushing fear of being ordinary. It was pathetic, and it was tragic. "I am not the loser anymore. Tabitha," I said. I turned to Graham. He was holding Elise's hand so tight his knuckles were white. "Here are the final terms," I said. "I am putting them on the record right now. Option 1. We list the house for sale immediately with a neutral realtor. The proceeds pay off the mortgage note I hold. We repay the money you stole from the company back into the estate pot. Then, whatever is left, we split 3 ways. Graham nodded slowly. "And if we don't?" "If you don't," I said, "I will lift the stay in 30 days, and I will foreclose. I will take the house. I will sell it myself, and I will sue you for the deficiency. You will walk away with nothing but a criminal record." "I will sign," Graham said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Graham, no!" Tabitha shrieked from the floor. "You can't! That is our house. That is my legacy." "It is over, Tabs," Graham said, tears running down his face. "We lost. We spent money we didn't have. It is over." "I won't sign," Tabitha spat, glaring up at me with pure venom. "I will never sign your papers. You are bluffing. You won't throw your own sister out. You are too weak. You always want people to like you." I looked at her. I realized she still didn't see me. She saw the caricature she had invented. "I am not looking for you to like me. Tabitha," I said, "I am looking for you to pay me." "I refuse," she said, standing up and brushing off her skirt. She tried to regain her composure, chin lifting in a parody of dignity. "I refuse to be bullied by a failed freelancer. Do your worst." I didn't blink. "I will." The following week. The eviction notices were not necessary because Graham and Elise moved out voluntarily. I allowed them to take their furniture and personal items. I even paid for the movers, but Tabitha refused to leave. She locked herself in the master suite. She posted photos on social media of the view from the window with captions like, "Home is where the heart is, and never give up on your legacy." She was betting on my guilt. She was betting that I would crack. She lost the bet. On the 31st day, the sheriff arrived, not because I called him to drag her out, but because the court-appointed administrator had ordered the property secured for sale. Since Tabitha refused to cooperate with the listing agent, she was legally trespassing on estate property. I met Graham and Elise at the house one last time before the locks were changed. The house was echoing and empty. The rugs were gone, leaving pale rectangles on the hardwood floors where the sun hadn't bleached the wood. It smelled of dust and old secrets. "I am sorry. Serenity," Graham said. We were standing in the kitchen. He looked 10 years older, but lighter somehow. "I was a coward. I let her run everything because it was easier than fighting her." "I know," I said. "But you are paying for it now." "We found a rental in the next town over," Elise said softly. "It is small, but it is ours. No more crestfall. No more lies." "That is a good start," I said. I walked through the house alone. I went into the dining room where we had eaten Thanksgiving dinners that always ended in arguments. I went into the study where Tabitha had tried to plant the fake debt. I went up the stairs, my hand trailing on the banister I used to slide down. I stopped at the doorframe of the pantry. There, faint but visible, were the pencil marks. Serenity, age 6. Serenity, age 8. Tabitha, age 10. My mother had drawn them. It was a record of our growth. Proof that we had once been just children, before money and status had turned us into combatants. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small chisel I had brought from my toolkit. "What are you doing?" Graham asked from the hallway. "I am taking this," I said, carefully, gently. I pried the strip of molding loose. The wood groaned, then popped free. I held the piece of trim in my hands. It was just painted wood with pencil marks. Worthless to a realtor, worthless to the bank, but it was the only thing in this house that was real. "You can have the rest," I said, putting the wood in my bag. "I have what I came for." I walked out of the house. The for sale sign was already being hammered into the frozen lawn by the neutral realtor the court had hired. The final twist didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened on a screen. Tabitha, having been escorted off the property, did not go quietly into the night. She went to the internet. She filed a pro se appeal, a desperate legal Hail Mary that Dana said would be dismissed in weeks, but her real court was Facebook and Instagram. She posted a 5-minute video. She was crying, no makeup, sitting in what looked like a cheap motel room. "I am a victim of financial abuse," she wept into the camera. "My sister, who has always been jealous of me, used a legal loophole to buy my mortgage and throw me out of my childhood home. She is a predator. She has millions of dollars she hid from the family, and she used it to destroy us. Please, share this. Let the world know what Serenity Stewart did to her grieving sister." The post went viral in Briar Glen. The comments poured in. "That is horrible. How could a sister do that? Money changes people. Shame on her. Stay strong. Tabitha." But then, the tide shifted. People started asking questions. Wait, why did she need to buy the mortgage? Were you in foreclosure? If you were broke, how were you driving a Range Rover? I heard about the court case. Didn't the judge say there was forgery? Dana called me. "Do you want to issue a statement? We can draft a cease and desist." "No," I said. "I am done explaining myself." I logged into my own account. I didn't have many followers, mostly old colleagues and friends from the city. I found Tabitha's post. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't defend my character. I didn't mention the lasagna or the coat or the insults. I posted a link to the public court docket. Estate of Marla Stewart versus Tabitha Stewart et al. Specifically the judge's final order detailing the simulated signature and the embezzlement. And I wrote 3 words, "Read the record." I turned off my phone. The internet turned unpredictable. Some people doubled down on hating me, calling me cold and heartless. Others read the legal documents and turned on Tabitha with the ferocity of a mob that realizes it has been duped. The broke joke collapsed into a public record of fraud. But I wasn't watching. I was standing outside Renfield Lane at dusk. The house was dark. The wind was whipping through the bare trees. I held the packet in my hand. It contained the deed to the property, which would transfer to the new owners once the sale closed next month. It contained the check for my share of the estate, substantially larger now that the stolen funds were being clawed back, and it contained the piece of wood with the pencil marks. I didn't know what my family would do next. Graham would try to rebuild. Tabitha would likely spend the rest of her life playing the victim, telling anyone who would listen about the sister who stole her kingdom. But as I stood there, pulling my charcoal coat tight against the chill, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the mess. I wasn't the failure. And I was definitely not broke. I looked at the house one last time, whispered a goodbye to the mother who had tried her best but couldn't stop the rot, and turned toward my rental car. I had a train to catch. I had a life in the city to return to. And for the first time in 33 years, I was walking away not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as Serenity. And that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to They Mocked Me for Being Broke and Took My Share, so I bought the house they live in. I hope you enjoyed Serenity's journey from being the underdog to becoming the one holding all the cards. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment letting me know where in the world you are listening from and what you thought of Tabitha's final attempt to flip the script. Did she get what she deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, karma, and the sweet taste of victory. Don't forget to share your thoughts in English in the comments below.